Well, I thought it looked all right with the graphics. I can't speak.
I don't think anyone would have noticed. But let's take a look through today's papers with writer Emma Wolfe and journalist James Bloodworth. Good morning, both of you.
Morning, gang.
We're going to start with Emma. You've got a story from the front page of the Times.
Yes, indeed. You've been talking about it. This is the new definition that we've all been calling out for. Can we have a new definition of extremism? It's not the problem. We just want a new definition of it. You haven't said anything about how you're going to deal with it. Michael Gove, of the Communities and Levelling Up sector. I still want to understand why he's getting involved in this. I suppose communities vaguely, but really, I think
it's a Home Office issue, isn't it?
He should be dealing with levelling up.
He's the go-to person, isn't he? He's
Just
the sort of the...
getting involved.
Involved in everything and master of none. What's that phrase?
Exactly, yeah.
Is this because of the work that he's done previously, you know, with the whole Trojan horse story and prevent programmes? Is this why he's been at the forefront
I don't
of
quite
this?
get why extremism is his brief. No. Frankly, it should be.
It is a hobby horse of his.
It is.
And for a while, yeah. He
A
wrote
Trojan hobby horse.
Yes.
He wrote a book a long time ago about extremism, and I think he's got a point in that you don't want the government working with... There was a scandal years ago with the government working with kind of community leaders who then would be... You'd see stuff coming out with them making anti-Semitic comments or whatever. Yeah. But maybe they should also look closer to home because you have some members of the, Tory donors who are making quite extremist comments. But
he wouldn't be covered. He wouldn't be covered by this.
No.
He wouldn't, you know, he would have said.
What do you make of this? Because
five years for this stuff to come out anyway.
My point is, Nick was talking about funding. I just would like a response. There's that side of it. My question is how do we deal? Is it the police? Is it Mark Rowley? Is it the government? Is it in London Sadiq Khan? How do we deal with the people who are hijacking peaceful protests, the fanatics and the extremists that are there? That is not saying that in plain sight. I saw the other day, I was talking to Nick, and she said, that's right, it's the police, right? I saw a bloke with a banner up saying Hamas are terrorists. He got bundled to the floor by 5 police, and people, fanatics, not genuine people marching, were left. So are the police at fault? Why?
Well, I've argued for a while that we need some kind of special force, given that the police are under so much pressure. We need some kind of special force to deal with these demonstrations and to understand the difference and to take a more balanced approach. This is this new definition. It's going to cover unacceptable behaviour that isn't actually criminal. But I just don't think this is the problem. As you guys were discussing earlier, it's not about the definition. I think we all know what we're talking about here. It's about how they're going to deal with it. And we still haven't really had meat on the bones. Yes, it does deny them funding. They'll be denied taxpayer funding. They'll be prevented from meeting ministers and influencing the government. But there are lots of groups that aren't covered. For example, there are some sort of universities that aren't covered. There are councils, arm's-length bodies. I don't know what arm's-length bodies are, but that's quite a vague term.
Councils
independent
have been the biggest
government
problem
bodies
in the past as well, with them taking advice from people they haven't done due diligence on, and that they're excluded from it. So it just seems, again, like so many things the government's doing lately, it seems like this is about headlines. Yes. When you look at the substance, it's like, what does this even mean?
I think they need to be seen to be doing something, especially since Rishi Sunak's emergency statement outside Downing Street that Friday afternoon when he came out and said, we've got to do something. And everyone said, yeah, we do. There is a problem. You know, we are, and we're getting more and more
sound bites rather than detail, right?
The whole thing, I've read it so many times this morning, the whole thing is guidance for themselves.
Yes.
This didn't need to be made public almost, did it? They could have just had a meeting amongst themselves and gone, guys, we probably shouldn't be funding anyone who's,
with the police. Guys, this is how to police these protests. This is what we want you to be doing.
But this doesn't even cover anything to do with the police necessarily. It's just about who can interact with government.
It's interesting, isn't it? We say that the Labour Party, to show that it's electable, needs to put meat on the bone. The Tory Party seems hell-bent every day on releasing another statement about something else that seems to quite rightly matter to people, and it does matter in this country, and then it just causes even more confusion. Can we go to The Guardian, James? I'm really interested in both of your takes on this. Obviously, that donor... Frank Hester, those racist comments condemned by everybody. Sunak hasn't given back the money. I don't want to argue about that. What I'm interested in is Diane Abbott.
Not being able to speak yesterday in the chamber while there were how many men discussing the case? What? And I don't even like Diane Abbott.
I hate Diane Abbott. She has the right to speak.
Did she stand up?
Over 40 times.
That is outrageous.
To have a question taken.
But the big issue here, and you're saying, is she's now accusing the party, the Conservative Party, of playing the race card. And I'm not on any political side in this, right? But here's the interesting thing. The left wing have now come out and said to Starmer, you should reinstate a woman who a year ago was got rid of, lost the whip because she made those anti-Semitic comments. He is at pains to do something about that problem. She's now this is just descending into... You know when I say to you, people won't turn out because they are losing by the hour the respect for our politicians? Yesterday, Nick said it just then. It was just like a kid's point-scoring competition, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, the Tories created this problem because they took 24 hours to, when Frank Heston made these remarks, the Tories, Rishi Sunak is running scared of people on his backbenches. He's terrified of another news channel and another party that's recently formed. And so he said nothing of substance about this racism row. And I think Diane Abbott, you know, the reason she was expelled from the Labour Party, that's a separate issue.
It is.
And someone could be both a perpetrator of prejudice and a victim of it. Those two things can both be true at the same time.
But having had it done to you should not, the point I'm trying to make, should not eradicate what you've said before and what you were punished for.
I mean, these to me are completely separate issues. And I think Keir Starmer was his issue with Diane Abbott, yeah, that's a separate thing. But he has every right also to point to the Tories and say they've been incredibly slow to call out this racism row. Frank Heston for his comments.
And actually, it wasn't 24 hours. I mean, it was the morning and
before
then
he said it was racism, though.
Yeah, but it's actually 5 years because these comments actually were reported in The Guardian in 2019.
5 years? So we were 3 yesterday.
Well, in 2019, nearly 5 years. So you could argue that they're even...
And his hand was pushed because Kemi Badenoch and Kwasi Kwarteng came out and said it. I think it's another example of...
They're really leading the party.
It's another example of it. It's just out of its depth.
It's unedifying, isn't it? Like you say, kids... Well, worse than kids slinging mud at each other. It's you know, you're more racist than we are. Wow, guys, not a good look at all.
No, it really isn't. At all. Next story now, front page of the Mail, Emma.
Yes.
All about defence spending.
Yeah, so this is Grant Shapps. He wants more money. He says, I want a bigger budget. So most men would say that. I want a bigger budget.
Wow, not too much bitterness in your household this morning, is it?
I'm saying
You're telling me men want more money?
I just think it's a funny thing to say. I want a bigger budget. It just made me snigger because I'm being silly.
Being married. Go on.
God, yeah, I would hate that. So we currently spend around 2.27 of GDP on our defence budget. He wants 3%. The Chancellor has said we've committed to 2.5%. What Shapps' point is, we want this in the Conservative manifesto. We live in a more dangerous world. He's citing the threat from Putin specifically, but Russia and China more generally. He says we've got Putin on the front line making gains, and we need to commit to this spending.
I'm really strong on this.
As a pacifist, I'm just like, 3%?
I don't think, you know, people will say, you know, Putin, Ukraine. I get war fatigue, and I absolutely get there's a cost of living crisis, but Sweden and Finland didn't join NATO as a joke. If he wins in Ukraine, anybody can look me in the face and say Vladimir Putin won't put a foot over Ukraine into something else. And actually, under NATO legislation, if he does, whether people like this or not, we will be at war with Russia. That is why we have to spend more. I thought the Tory party, as a party when I was growing up, was based on a strong military. I understand we've got no money, but I absolutely think we have to do something about it.
The Chancellor actually made a good point for once in his life.
Did
he said it's not about the amount of spending because he doesn't want to spend more. He said it's about procurement. There's a huge amount in defence procurement. You can waste billions, can't you? I'm sure you know more about this than I do. You can waste billions on not buying the right stuff, not having the right equipment. You really can. So it may actually be about spending smarter rather than just throwing more money at this.
I mean, I do think that we have to get to grips with that the world's changed. And I agree with your point about Putin. I mean, just the day before yesterday, Navalny, someone who worked with Navalny was attacked with a hammer in Lithuania. I mean, they're not just going for... Putin's not... There's been the use of weapons of mass destruction in Salisbury, for example. There's been the murder of Alexander Litvinenko. In London, like Putin's critics are seen as fair game all over the world now. And if Putin wins in Ukraine, it will be countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia next. It won't stop there.
No, it won't. USSR, that's what he wants back. And the day... I understand war fatigue, but the truth of the matter is, unless we do something, not because... For our security, what was it Lord Dunnett said the other day that before the Second World War, we were spending 3%. When we realised we were spending 62% of GDP. I just think they need to do something.
And I think with Trump entering the White House as well, there's a possibility. I mean,
oh, yes.
I mean, Europe needs to... Trump has said this because he's not going to fund NATO in the way that the Americans have done before. Yeah. Europe needs to fund more of its own defence. And I think, especially with what Russia and China are doing now, that's increasingly urgent.
Is this not long... Yeah, I'm just thinking in the long term. Putin, I don't know how old he is, but What happens?
70?
What happens when he passes away? What happens when he dies? Is there somebody who will be as strong as Putin?
He will groom a successor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That will probably already be in motion now.
That'll be the Kremlin. That'll be a done deal.
But it's not already out there, is it, that he's got a successor?
No, I mean,
he's gearing up for another 6 years. He
Yeah.
thinks he thinks.
I
He's
mean,
fine.
he is the
President for
dictator.
life.
Yeah.
And as somebody said to us last week, didn't they, Nick, that you know, whether you agree with supporting Ukraine or you have war fatigue, the truth of the matter is Putin is not going to be defeated by his own people because it's a dictatorship. They get told what they get told.
Yeah.
If you defeat him in a war, that will be the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin. That is it. That's an absolute fact, which is why we have to support Ukraine.
But he's still got to be replaced by somebody, right? So, speaking of national security, TikTok today is facing a ban in America, Emma.
Yeah, so obviously this is a social media platform, massively popular, hugely popular. And the House of Representatives just voted, they've overwhelmingly voted to approve legislation that could ban TikTok in the US over security concerns. They voted 352 to 65. So if this bill is approved by the Senate and Joe Biden is behind it, then he will sign it off. TikTok will have 6 months to sell its stake in the social media platform. So, yeah, this could be the beginning of the end for TikTok in the States.
And what are these security fears, James? What do they fear is happening?
Well, several things. So, I mean, a huge number of people get their news from TikTok, especially young people in the United States and Europe. And, you know, it's effectively owned by the Chinese state. So the Americans are saying we're not going to, you know, ban it as such. And, like, as long as this Chinese state company sells it, then TikTok can remain legal in the US. And it's also data collection. Do Americans really want all of their data being held by a Chinese state company, considering the nature of the Chinese dictatorship? Probably not.
I don't really understand about TikTok, but I do think China are
I think it's
massive.
terrifying.
It's
so
banned
many
in
people get
mainland
their
China.
news from
Mainland Chinese people can't use it. So so the question is this something that's being used as a propaganda thing in the West by the Chinese state? I mean, it's plausible to me.
Am I right in saying that the owners of TikTok say that there are no links with the Chinese state?
Yeah, but this has been kind of rubbish. There have been investigations that show they are linked to the Chinese state. I mean, and this is why you have a bipartisan consensus in the US. Pretty much, you only had a handful, 65 senators voted against it.
352 votes in favour of this. It's
Yeah.
overwhelmingly passed.
And do you
Of
think
both sides of the House.
Just really quickly, if the US ban it, do you think there's a chance that the UK will do the same?
If only we would.
Maybe.
She's not big on that, on social media, tablets or anything.
No,
No
absolutely
television, no
not.
husbands, nothing. It's true, isn't it?
No husbands as well.
Hey,
That part of it.
you hate television men and you love cycling. That's the truth, isn't it?
Sounds
Did
great.
you cycle
to me.
here this morning?
I did. I cycled in.
You're
It was a
mad.
lovely. It was a racing ride.
Really? Yeah. I
wasn't
don't
raining.
see you when I come.
Jeremy
round
got
the
his
corner and
helicopter to the roof, as he always does. On
No, I
Thursday.
didn't. I didn't.
And you
get
got your
the hell-
boat.
Okay, I brought my boat.
Yeah, she got a boat to the front door. Yeah.
I sailed in.
She's going on a boat tomorrow to Cheltenham races.
Well, Nicola and I are
certainly
green.
not.
That's all. We're saving the planet.
There we
Sorry-
go.
Sorry it upsets you, Jeremy.
Well, thank you so much to Emma and
Wow.
James. They will be back in just under an hour. Thank you both.